Forces and ready.
So I guess now I can finally tell you what Thunderf00t actually does. Well, other than make the odd awesome source video on YouTube. And more importantly, why I'm still here. But remember, after 40 or so million video views of a all but anonymous voice making arguments, primarily for the reason that a good argument stands on its merits, not on my qualifications, it was a Muslim guy who hunted for my docs for months and then when he finally got them, spread them around, including informing an Islamic group where I work.
I also wonder what the Muslim Student Association on that campus would believe about a faculty member endorsing these sort of bigoted opinions, which is why I sent every single one of them your videos, your statements, with your name attached.
A tactic which has been widely used by his fellow believers both in Saudi and in Malaysia.
I won't bow in front of you, I won't kiss your hand. Instead, I will shake it as an equal. And no Saudi women will go to hell because it's impossible to go there twice. After these tweets, Kashgari became the target of harassment and death threats. His name and address were posted,
Which is why I sent every single one of them your videos, your statements, with your name attached.
His name and address were posted, and he fled the country. As of Friday, over 14,000 people have joined a Facebook group called The Saudi People Demand the Execution of Hamza Kashgari. A video posted to YouTube shows the Saudi Sheikh Nasser al-Almar weeping over the tweets, calling them the worst things he'd ever read. Hamza Kashgari fled the country Sunday to avoid being arrested for his religious tweets, only to find himself in the hands of the Malaysian police today. It has been reported that Malaysia, an officially Islamic state, will forcibly repatriate Kashgari to Saudi Arabia.
And why? Because I called bullshit when he said that he thought his religion gave him a mandate to kill people.
As mandated in the Quran and the true interpretation of the Sharia that all true Muslims and the majority of the Muslims in the world share. We Muslims, the servants of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and our non-Muslim allies, will send you to the God that you wish you knew.
Yeah, that really justifies writing to some local Muslim group telling them where I work, doesn't it? I mean, let me just make this clear. Your religion never gives you a command, a right, a mandate, or anything else to kill people under any circumstances. I mean, is it really such a big ask for you to accept without contingency, that your religion never gives you a mandate to kill people?
As of Friday, over 14,000 people have joined a Facebook group called The Saudi People Demand the Execution of Hamza Kashgari.
Indeed, shouldn't we outlaw religions that mandate the extrajudicial killing by their adherents? You know, as a sort of minimum requirement for state recognition. I mean, damn, can you imagine any other form of sort of mental social club that would get away with such reprehensible statements? For instance, imagine an Elvis fan club that required that you kill members who no longer accepted that Elvis was the king, or that didn't dress like Elvis.
We're the Flying Elvis' Utah chapter.
Or drew pictures of Elvis, or calling for the death of someone in their thousands for the crime of crimes, tweeting that Elvis wasn't the king. Hell, let's extend this to all of the Abrahamic religions. When you hear the voices inside of your head saying that the god of some obscure desert people wants you to kill your son as a test of faith, the only appropriate response is to seek medical help. In the age of enlightenment, we have medication that will cure you of such gods. Cure you of gods such as the God of Abraham. Only the insane would even contemplate obeying the voices in their head at that point. And it's utterly incredible that about half the people on the planet take this act of infanticidal insanity as the foundational virtuous test of faith of their religion. And yeah, believe it or not, even now, in the 21st century, when we can hurl objects out of the solar system, where we have sequenced the genome of our very species, there are still religious folks who celebrate annually, in this case the Muslims, they actually celebrate the virtues of this psychopathic infanticidal act. And look, practically everyone agrees with this. Not even a religious childcare group would get away with a clause along the lines of, "We follow Abraham's example, and we promise to look after your child unless, of course, God tells us to kill them as an act of faith." Having said that, there are still leading Christian apologists who think that if God commands one of his chosen people to kill a baby by putting a sword through its head, then you're actually blessing the child that you kill with an infinite good.
If you believe, as I do, in the salvation of infants or children who die, what that meant was that the death of these children meant their salvation. They were the recipients of an infinite good as a result of their earthly phase of life being terminated.
Anyway, I digress. I was going to tell you a little more about what I do. You see, I sort of started out as a chemist, but then kind of switched over to physics for a few years, where I worked on neutron scattering, before moving to marry the technique up with molecular dynamics and applying this to mainly biochemical systems. So what I'll do is, I'll do neutron scattering experiments on liquids. Typically not any liquids, but liquids of fairly specific isotopic concentrations. For instance, the gram or so of hydrogen-37 chloride I'm distilling here would retail at about $30,000. The samples are then put into a neutron beam to measure the structure of the samples, which the experiments typically take 3 to 5 days, again with the beam time retailing at about $30,000 a day, just to actually acquire the data. For the interpretation side of things, I run the molecular dynamics simulations and then write the custom code to extract the functions in order to aid in the interpretation of the neutron scattering data. Then, of course, you actually have to work out what are the implications of all of this, which is mainly in the function of biological molecules in aqueous solutions. So it's basically a sort of molecular level insight into the workings of life. So yeah, this is why a lot of people actually have trouble placing what field I'm in that I actually know my way fairly well around chemistry, biochemistry and physics, as well as being a keen astronomer. Now, the vast majority of the knowledge that I have is not my own. It's part of a invisible ivory tower that was built by civilization over centuries, and I'm constantly baffled by just how few people acknowledge its existence. After all, it's mankind's single greatest asset. Without it, and the thoughts of the great minds long since dead stored within it, I would be intellectually blind, spending my short and miserable life doing little more than banging the rocks together, as would every single one of you watching this video. And yes, in all likelihood, I would accept, in the absence of the knowledge of mental illness, that a man who was willing to kill his son because he heard voices in his head really was doing God's work. I mean, why else would anyone even think about killing their child? For the gift of knowledge that I have received from society, from the acquired knowledge of the ivory tower, is it really such a big ask that I spend some time to try and preserve it for the minds yet to come? And then you step back from this research, building the ivory tower incrementally bigger, and then you look back at civilization and you realize that the world's most popular religion believes that saying magical incantations over crackers will turn them into a celestial zombie's flesh who is his own daddy, and that by eating this flesh he will be absolved of the sins of a dirt man and a rib woman when they were convinced to commit the atrocity of eating enchanted fruit by a talking snake. For fuck's sake, what's the point of working on the intermolecular interactions that define the parameter space of life when the lion's share of people on the planet cannot divorce themselves from this voodoo? About 1 billion people on this planet, that's 1 in 6, hold this cracker story as truth dictated by religious dogma. Within a few metaphorical footsteps from the ivory tower to the shitty mire of paranoid religions that cling to the minds of mankind with parasitic tenacity. And all of a sudden that YouTube channel, woven together by the work of the hands of but one person, with its 40 or so million hits, appears as a useful source of information in helping people to see in the no-holds-barred, in the unforgiving light of day, the naked, jaw-dropping stupidity of such beliefs, in shifting the balance of ideas away from such religious dogma. It really is this simple. If no one does anything, nothing will change. Change is effected by the hands of those who act, and not those who are content merely with the status quo. And this is why I so vigorously support the Reason Rally. Yeah, damn straight I act. To walk away from such a communication tool and just let it wilt on the vine, as so many have, would be crazy. If you're going to throw the towel that easily, mankind is screwed. And that's why a moderately successful academic, one who has the choice of walking the comfortable, happy and secure path of an academic career, chooses to spend his time wading in the fecal intellectual mire of religion, shining the sterilizing spotlight of reason on the morally reprehensible who would quite happily justify the killing of children or their sexual abuse in God's name. Spending time pig-sticking intellectual muppets who would seek to undermine the foundations of human knowledge. The goal is worthy, the sacrifice acceptable. For the sake of the coming man, fuck them.